This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Before we invite the stars of the film on stage, I would like briefly to introduce Ms. Sarukkai Penamurti and Dr. Harshita Kamat, who will be our moderators today. Ms. Penamurti is currently an instructor in Emory's Department of Theater and Dance and the founder of the Academy of Kuchipudi Dance. She is also an expert on Indian classical dance and has performed around the world. Dr. Kamat received her PhD from Emory's Graduate Division of Religion in 2012. She was an assistant professor of religion at Middlebury College from 2013 to 2014 and is currently a visiting research scholar there. Her area of research focuses on South Indian dance style of Kuchipudi, and she has been a student of Sarukkai Penamurti since 1998. Please join me in welcoming our speakers and moderators to the stage. Thank you.
Namaste, everybody. Happy Navaratri to all of you. And we are really fortunate to have the great artist, and I'm extremely delighted to sit right next to her, and the filmmaker. We welcome them, and it's truly a wonderful documentary for every dancer and every audience to see. And while I was watching the movie, I really got tears into my eyes. And it's first of all, I felt when I was watching the movie, it's a wonderful tribute to the great art form and to the artist herself, and the majesty of beautiful art form and the elegance and the beauty of the entire dance was very, very neatly and clearly portrayed in this film. So first thing I wanted to ask the dancer and the star of this film, Malavika Garu, how did you feel about the film? Because I'm sure I felt it's a tribute. How did you feel about that?
Well, firstly, I think it's wonderful for Sumantra and me to be here and be invited by Dr. Sheth and Madhuji to come here and present this film for such a distinguished audience. I think what is remarkable about this film is that it's, like you correctly said, it is a tribute to dance. It is a tribute to creativity. It's a tribute to tradition which actually has the suppleness to adapt and change and reinvent itself. But having said that, you wouldn't have seen it this way if it wasn't for Sumantra's perception, really, for his very perceptive, sensitive, intuitive feel to the dance form and my art in particular to bring it out like this. So I think a lot of credit goes to him to, actually I think this was also his vision to show it in this way. Am I right? Perhaps you could add to it.
Yeah, I think I did add something. It was probably my own innocence and my own bewilderment to start with. And then I think Malavika took me by the hand, a bit like Yashoda does, and took me to places that I had not seen and I could only dream of. So it was a great journey. It was wonderful to be able to accompany an artist like Malavika, and then to try and see how I could bring my own personality to bear on something that is so overpowered by hers. So I had decided right at the very beginning that I would tell 3 stories, as we've talked about, but I was wanting the stories to play off each other, to interplay, to interact, rather than remain in separate boxes. And so that's the journey of the film. But it was, yes, certainly it was a tribute to both the art form, Bharatanatyam, and not just to Bharatanatyam. I think it was also a tribute to trying to understand process, understand not just final product, not just performance, but all of that. And that applies to many arts across the board. It's not obviously limited to either dance or to Bharatanatyam. So those were the concerns, those were the preoccupations, and well, I hope some of that is communicated.
So my question is actually for both the artist as well as the filmmaker. The beauty of this film, I thought, was that we saw Malavika Garu portray a range of characters. I mean, from the Naika to an old woman who has lost her son on the banks of Varanasi. I mean, the kind of range of emotions that we see, from Yashoda to a barren woman who has trees as children. So I'm wondering, where do you draw inspiration from for portraying those characters, one? And then for the filmmaker, what were your choices in choosing which items to portray?
Well, I think my inspiration actually comes from life, from the world, from the interrelatedness of the arts. I've always been inspired by sculpture and painting. My mother and me used to have a lot of discussions, and we'd visit museums and look at it. So all that sort of was part of the inflow into my sort of the creative field, if I could call it that. And I drew from that. And I think Varanasi, the old woman, I mean, it's life. If you go to Varanasi and you stand on the banks, you cannot but be affected by what you see. And it just shows you the larger perspective to living and dying. And I think if you're an artist and you're sensitive and you're tremulous almost, that you pick up all these vibrations, and somewhere along, it sort of translates into a choreography or a piece you want to say. I mean, the barren woman planting trees, it was by accident, on some flight when I read her story. And I said, why am I not telling her story? Why are we only speaking about love songs of the lover and the beloved? And I just felt she was a very important character, a very important, situation and mind frame, because it's about affirmation. It's about finding a way through nothing. So yes, I am sort of affected by a lot of things, including trees. I've done a lot on the environment. That's another film.
Well, can I speak? Can you hear me if I just don't lean forward in that threatening manner?
There's not, yeah.
Yes, there was a lot of material to choose from, particularly in today's digital age. You end up shooting 200 hours, 250 hours easily. But I've always felt that it's not how much you shoot, but how little you keep that makes the difference. And how little you keep is determined by what stories you're telling yourself, rather than determined by what stories she told on stage. So the two narratives have to coalesce, have to inform each other. And so I chose dance based on whether I was making an editorial point, whether I was clarifying my own confusion, or whether it was just too terrific not to show. So there were many, many impulses that lead to choice. But I think a lot of those begin to depend on those wonderful two words, only connect. And if they were great but didn't connect in some way, the film would begin to fall apart. And you only get a sense of all of this over time, over editing, over being self-critical and hugely critical even of the person you're actually celebrating. So all those things, I think, sort of played with each other, against each other, to inform what dances I chose, and what story I was telling in the end.
Also, I felt the opening of the film itself, dancing in the Chidambaram temple, it's one of the places of Lord Nataraja's dancing, and that was very unique way of starting the film. It's so wonderful, and especially dancing in front of the God. It's a different feeling, like you said, you're surrendering yourself to God. And how do you feel performing to the audience, and how do you distinguish that from performing in front of the God?
Well, I went to Chidambaram because it is a special place for me. Holds many resonances. So sometimes I have to go there and connect with my own dialogue. Also, the sort of the sacred or the spiritual, or those moments are very much a part of my work, very much a part of my journey in dance. And so I do present choreographies like that on the stage. And yes, it's different because the stage space has to be actually energized by the artist. You get on the stage and you have to turn the energy around to make it a conduit for perhaps this other vision. It's difficult, it's a challenge, it's a meditative process, it is a lot of focusing, it's a lot of internalizing, because different stages and theaters have just different vibrations. Sometimes you walk into a space, you would have felt it yourself. When you walk in, there are some spaces which are very friendly, and there are some spaces which are somehow uneasy. Theater spaces are like that. And so it really requires a lot of very internal focusing to come on the stage. And also because we are given a time, it's like saying 6:30 is your concert. So we have to prepare and come on the stage if we want to envision the more. If we don't want to envision the more, it's very simple. We come and we perform. It's easy. Then it's not such a demand on oneself. But if you want to go beyond, if you want to touch the stars, if you want to reach out, and if you want to find something for ourselves in the moment, it is a meditative pursuit over years. It doesn't happen in the first 10, 20 years. It's a long journey, but it's exciting, and it's, as I said in the film, it's unrepeatable. It's just so unique.
Also, it's a performing through these dances in front of the God. It's more like you're celebrating the dance form, and also it makes you feel that you're getting closer to the God through this dance form. And because I dance here many times in the temple for several events, and it's definitely the God or goddess is your audience. So it draws your complete energy towards the God or goddess, and it feels like you're getting closer to the deity.
No, I would just like to say that these moments of, magic, it's just that internally you touch a harmony. You can call it spiritual, you can call it anything you want. Ecstasy, you can call it by any name. It's just that you touch a harmony of body and mind, which Indian classical dance celebrates, and we practice, we are moving in that direction. So when we touch alignment, it is ecstasy, and we call it whatever. You can call it by any name, but it's just touching those moments.
So the one thing in the film that really struck me, which we don't normally see, is a dancer changing their choreography across performances. And I was really struck by Pattarabhirameya's Javali, the inclusion of the bird in the cage. And I was wondering maybe if you could talk about your choreographic choice of including that imagery, and then also about your choice of including that as part of the film, because to me it read as part of the narrative of the Devadasi that you were trying to tell. So if you could speak a bit about that.
I don't know, I think it's just that the compositions I present, I wanted to, it has to sort of make sense to me. I don't want to be repetitive in the work I do. And I mean, frankly thought that if I'm going to spend 6 minutes on a song which says you promised me this and that, and you didn't give it to me, I thought it's a waste of time. And I said, why am I doing this on the stage? Why am I taking up my time? Nowadays our concerts are an hour and a half. And why would I just be just a mockery of this, or just make it so entertaining? And I wanted to find a twist to it, and I said, otherwise I can't do it. So it came about, as you saw in the film, first as the first interpretation, and the second one, the bird in the cage. And the moment I had the bird in the cage, I was happy. Because I knew I had touched, it was going to actually say many more multiple, meanings. And it was not the literal. So I think that's what art needs to be, right? It needs to be layered. It needs to be deeper. It needs to make you think or change So I think that was my choice. And, you can't repeat a piece just because you've done it one way. It's constantly reinventing yourself and thinking afresh, which makes one's own evolving more challenging and exciting. So I think that's the way it is.
You can see an inspiration from Kaladini Narayanan in terms of that shifting or changing metamorphosis of the Javali or the Padam. Every time you do it, it becomes new. So, and I really appreciated that you included that as part of the film. Was there anything else you were trying to tell in terms of that?
Oh, lots of things.
Obviously. But
this was one of them, which I think is stated. But there were many other things. There was a historical idea behind including that dance when it was included, or where it was included, because you see the dance moved from being from the temple to being for the court and the king. And as soon as that movement happened, it became more performative, it became more seductive in a way, it became more enticing, as opposed to what you saw in Chidambaram, which was a more giving of oneself in praise of the deity or in pursuit of that spiritual. So the Javali was also a bridge to what happened to dance and dancers as a result of those enticements, as a result of that movement in history. And what that moves on to is the idea of the Devdasi as the fallen woman. And the fallen woman idea begins or is implanted as soon as the woman has to dress up not for God, but for man. So many things happen as a result of putting that Javali where it is. It's a bridge to a historical narrative. It is Malavika's own constant reinvention. So it is many things. She's also very attractive in that dance.
I have one question for filmmaker. I was wondering, I saw the film, and you can simply say it's a beautiful dancer. Malavika Garu is entirely the star of the film. Why did you choose the title, Unseen Sequence?
Well, she explains that right in the beginning of the film, but that was, again, only one part of it. In the course of confronting my own inadequacies as a filmmaker making a film on a subject I knew nothing about, I began to see many dots over time that I felt you needed to connect. I suddenly saw the power of a lyric written 800 years ago, set to music not so many years ago, and suddenly lit by a modern technician in Delhi. So, and yet all of those things which are which are spread over time, over geography, are just brought together because there are these underlying threads that hold them together. And for example, that is the reason why I include Bala Saraswati in the film, because I felt that she represented so many of those ideas in unseen sequences in one performer. She connects many different ideas together, and so many people connect back to her, including Malavika. But they're not connecting back because they studied with her or that they grew up in that environment, because it was a different environment to what Malavika. I think what connects these things are those unseen sequences, are those hidden sequences perhaps, that connect us all, in a way.
So we want to leave some time for audience questions. We have about another 15 minutes, I believe, and we have some volunteers with mics. So, yes, I think right here in the middle, Dr. Majmudar. If you can, please be sure to speak into the mic so that we can all hear. Or, Dr. Yes.
I have a question. What are they called? The one who danced in the temple earlier? Devdasis. Are they still exist? And if they do, I mean, in old times, did they have all the music and the singing that you have nowadays?
No, I think, we don't have really Devadasis performing in temples anymore. Though some artists like Swapna Sundari, she has sort of resurrected. She's gone to the Devadasis in Andhra and learned from them and tried to reconstruct their style. But we, as Devadasis, it's not in practice at the moment. But now what has happened is there are so many dancers who've learned Bharatanatyam that, say for Shivaratri, which happens in February, many temples in South India celebrate the festival of Shivaratri, and there are loads of dancers, numbers of both women and men who have taken to dancing all the styles, whatever, not only Bharatanatyam, who go to these temples and perform. In that sense, there's a sort of return to the temple on these festive occasions, but from another group of people, not Devadasis as such, because I think that whole generation has almost, disappeared.
So nobody dances regularly in temple the way they used to.
Just to add what she was saying, it is not just a generational thing, it's also a legal thing. The Devdasis have been banned. It was one of the first acts after independence approximately. And there was the Anti-Devdasi Act, and you can't even go and dance in a temple. It's illegal to dance in a temple. She didn't know that, and I didn't. We could both be arrested. But we weren't.
We have a question here and then here. Go ahead.
Yes, Malavika ji, I was wondering if you could speak to experiencing the ecstasy in your art, but not just in your art, as a woman carrying it throughout your life. And do you experience ecstasy differently than a man would?
Do you experience ecstasy differently from me?
I think we both should answer it. Actually, ecstasy is difficult you can't really articulate it. It's a moment. It's magic. It happens. But you need to be, I think, in dance and classical dance, you need to be sensitive, and you need to Actually, ecstasy happens in dance when the eye is not center stage. So when you're able to move the eye out, then you find the moment. So that's the meditative practice.
I could experience so many goosebumps, and that it goes to show what an effective presentation this has been. Two more things I wanted to bring up. The first creation of drama by Kalidasa is Malavika Agnimitram, where Malavika is a born dancer. It is in her genes. And therefore, Agnimitra, the king, hires the best teacher to instruct her. And after 3 months, he says, what is the progress report on Malavika? And you will enjoy, because you are a good teacher, I could say. He says, Yad yad bhavo nirdishyate maya tasyai tat tat vishesh karanat pratyupadishati me bala. I show her one bhava and she teaches me back, not like reproduces. So perhaps there is something about the name Malavika that dance follows. The second about Devdasi is about Kavi Jayadev, because he was intricately involved with Devdasis during that time, and he married one, Padmavati. And in his Geet Govindam, every Shungar Bhava that you expressed, they are put in articulate musical words there. And those are the two things I wanted to share. Thank you.
I think we have a question in the back.
Oh.
And then, if you have a mic, so here, Ravikal, and then pass the mic maybe back to Dr. Satyan.
Okay. Yeah, the richness and the depth of the beautiful art was brought out really, really wonderfully in this film. I really commend Dr. Sheth for bringing this to the forefront in front of a very intelligent audience, intelligentsia here. I have one question, I think, to both of you, primarily to the Malavika Garu, is how is this the amount of thing going on with the social media and amount of acceptance of the social media, how much of this is actually being continued in terms of students coming forward and saying they really want to understand the depth. For example, when you did the mentoring session, and you are actually trying to bring out the actual depth of how you embody the knowledge of the dance or the experience, and try to bring that out completely. How do you see how many of them are reacting to that and trying to take up the baton and trying to move it forward? And do you see a lot of acceptance, a lot of interest?
Well, if one notices now, there are lots of dancers, both women and men, who are taking up Bharatanatyam. I'm talking Bharatanatyam in particular. Not only in India, even in America, there are lots of people who are taking it up, and they take it up for different reasons. Because dancing is a joy, it's happiness, it gives you a high in some way. So people who dance, perhaps who give it up, at some point come back to it because they can't quite give it up. Because it's just that joy. So there are different reasons to dance. Having said that, not all dancers become artists. Because there are many stages. There's a student, there's a dancer, then there's the artist. So that's the long haul. That is a long journey. Some dancers who are willing to give more than they receive in the initial stages last out longer. Because dancing itself is difficult. It's not easy to align the body and the mind. It's hugely difficult. Because the mind chatters in its own way, the body has its own preoccupations. So learning dance, yes, there are many people in India who are training. How many make it to the top level? Very few, like in any other profession. because there's so many, what should I say, so many attributes they need to make it. And I think the whole idea of being able to sustain one's interest, one's faith, one's passion, one's hard work over the years, that is given to a few. But I'm finding nowadays there are students, a few of them, more serious, more interested in hard training, working with themselves, more thinking dancers. I'm sort of getting there, shall I say. I find there are more of them around. So hopefully, there'll be more seeds, there'll be more growth, and more vitality in dance. Because at the moment, dance is going in different directions, Bharatanatyam is going in different directions with a lot of noise, not so much melody. So we are waiting. I'm not saying it won't happen, but we need patience, we need time, we need support, we need funding, we need a whole bunch of things to make it happen. But as one says, keep faith, and be alert. So when something positive is happening, follow it.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. So here, and then if you can get a mic.
Related to what you just said, my question ties in with what you just said about how difficult and how much commitment you need, to continue to sustain the interest. And referring to that, one of the places, I think in the presentation, you brought up the urban girls or little girls from Europe, America, coming to India to learn the art, or some of them, they're excellent Bharatanatyam schools in Atlanta, in many other cities. But the point is that my question is, do you recommend these girls or even boys that they first learn about Indian traditions, Indian culture academically, or they should be aware of the culture? Because this art is deeply steeped in the culture of Indian traditions. So is it, I know you would not say it's necessary, but would it add to their training, to the hard training or learning the technical part?
I think, in any subject, if you have a more rounded vision and more dimension, it helps. But it's a long process. And, I couldn't say they must learn the academic part and then come to the dance training. It is sort of simultaneous. If you're looking for something deeper, you read more, you research more, you find scholars, you talk to people. It's a natural process. I don't think it's, so segregated. Also, I would say, in India as well as I know in America too, that people feel that the moment they do the Arangetram, which is the first, the first public concert, they feel that it's the end. Well, actually, that's the beginning. And that is what I think we have to readjust, mentally and say, what, we have done Arangetram, but that's the beginning. Because I tell dance students, I said, the Arangetram is like you have a huge mountain in front of you and you have to climb it. And it's hugely difficult and it's tough, it's hard work, and your guru is saying, go, 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 and you're trying and trying to climb it. And once you climb the first mountain, you actually have a vision of the other peaks, which lie beyond. And then you go climb the other peaks, and then you have many more peaks. And that is the discovery in dance, that, you go step by step. But, what looks effortless on this film takes a lot of sadhana. Because, it's easy to look complicated. It's very difficult to make it look essential. That's much tougher. So, yes.
We'll take our last question.
So, thank you very much for that lovely film. And thank you both for being here today and gracing us here. So the film showed beautifully, I think, how the art has to connect different elements. And from my point of view, that also means connecting different brain systems. So you're connecting, you spoke about connect, or it showed how you connect the lyrics, emotion, movement. So one of the things I wanted to ask you both is when you're setting a new piece or when you're making a film such as this film, what is the thought process that goes into the choice of the music? This may be fairly obvious to you, but how do you pick the raga that goes with the particular piece, etc.? I mean, what's the thought process behind that?
No, because music, I choose the music that you give me.
Well, that's a very creative part in choreography because, what is the sound design you want to use? So unless you have normally I work with some concept which I have in mind, a seed which is sort of forming and growing. And then I get music and I work with some music composers like C.V. Chandrasekhar because we sync in many ways. And then there are lots of discussions, many hours of discussions. Many times I meet him and we keep, he has different kinds of ragas which he uses, and then I'm saying, I think this works or it doesn't. And then, once one gets the lyric and the music, I can tell you it takes hours and weeks and months to choreograph. You have to be very patient and wait for that creativity, for the moment. Because I might have something as a concept, but if I have to find movement vocabulary for it, that is a challenge. So, it's many drafts, shall we say. Many drafts over months, and then we keep sculpting it and chiseling it and wondering, is this better, is that better? And you keep working. And then when I get my musicians in for rehearsal, then we do hours of rehearsing because they have to understand my concept. So that's the next phase. And then it's working in detail with the mridangist, with my singer, with my violinist, because they're all very important. And what they play is very critical to the concept. So there's a lot of detailing, but what is exciting about Indian dance is after all the detailing is over, there's freedom. And that's what we work towards, to find the freedom after the discipline.
Brought out very well as well is that as you've taken this art form to new places, to places where it traditionally has not been, and that is perhaps also in exploring some contemporary themes that you're now doing with this dance form. I was wondering about, at the same time, Bharatanatyam has got a very traditional rooting, and I think both aspects came out in the movies, in the film, so beautifully. So as you experiment and take this art form to places that it has not been, have you found it restrictive in any way that it is not, maybe certain themes could not be explored through Bharatanatyam, or if you've never felt that? And if you have felt that, are you bringing, where is your inspiration to sort of coming from to take it to places where it has not traditionally been?
I think, with this language of dance, I really call it a language rather than a style. It's the inventiveness to say, how am I rooted in tradition? How do I keep core and yet innovate? That is critical to my work. Because I don't want to innovate in such a way that I don't, when I look back, I say, oh, where are the roots? So, how does one have center, respect center, and yet innovate? And I think one person very, so neatly summed it up. They said, Kumar Gandharv, one of our great legendary vocalists, who was a great singer and who was steeped in tradition. Apparently, he used to sing with one hand held here and one hand like this. He was always singing like this. So this person who was looking at my art, he made an observation and he said, that is how one has to dance, because one has to hold tradition and yet let go. To be able to do both, then one actually innovates and reinvents a tradition. And that is very precious for me, the repossessing and reinventing of the tradition, because I respect it hugely and I admire it. And I'm saying, I want to keep with this, but I want to push and challenge and explore and definitely use metaphors and similes. I don't want to do the literal. So I think that's how if one finds the metaphor and simile, everything is possible. But through stylization, because it's not literal.
Thank you, Malavika garu and Samantha garu, for being here. Thank you for giving both me and Harshita this opportunity to be part of this whole event. We sincerely thank Sheth family for organizing this wonderful event this afternoon. Thank you.
Let me, I just wanted to thank, first of all, our director, Philip Wainwright, who is the vice provost, and it's his institute and the committee that decides who is selected as the Sheth lecturer. So thank you, Philip, for organizing this thing. And that goes not only for him, but wonderful people. Jong Dae, I think he's somewhere here. Yes, Jong Dae. Aaron, and they have been hard working at this thing. Just like the dance, there's a lot of activities behind the scene, and it takes lots of people to really carry out. So that's one more thanks. Thanks for the audience to come. Thank you very much. Sunday afternoons, such a beautiful day outside, probably one of the few nice days in Atlanta, and you have sacrificed that to come here, so thank you for that. I do want to specially acknowledge, besides the artist, Vinita Bali. So Vinita, stand up, please. She is the one who introduced me to Malavika. She said that you have to really meet her because she teaches what art can teach to business leaders. The discipline it requires, the detail, the freedom with core, everything else. And so I said, all right. So with her encouragement, Malavika's availability, we actually had a workshop in India, in Goa, a nice resort actually, and we had a wonderful time. So again, Malavika was gracious enough to come, and that led me to strongly encourage the committee and the Halle Institute and the Office of International Programs to see if we can somehow invite her here. I also want to add that last night, Sumantro Ghoshal and the producer of the movie, where is she? Sitting quietly in the back, wonderful lady. We had a quick dinner together and came to know them. And I must tell you, the writing part, the script, and the way you have narrated, that also moves us, okay? It's very interesting. So thank you for all of you to come here. Thank you.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.